Hello everyone and welcome back to a new episode of our program Weaving the Future. In today's world we can see that there are escalating wars and conflicts all over the world and that the capitalist system is using different tools and methods within these wars to suppress the people. And we can see that in recent conflicts the system is increasingly using the tool of media to fight for the minds and hearts of people. So in today's episode, we want to talk about the role and the importance of women's journalism, especially in regions where there wasn't conflicts. And that's why today we will be talking with Italian journalist and filmmaker Benedetta Argentieri.
My name is Benedetta Argentieri, and I have been a journalist for more than 20 years, and the last ones mainly as a freelance. And I'm also a documentary filmmaker. Basically focusing on the Middle East and women's movements and revolutions around the world.
Yes, and could you tell us what inspired you to become a journalist in the first place?
Mm-hmm. So I think, I was in my 20s during 9/11 and the war in Iraq in 2003, and I was also marching with millions of other people against the war, but the war started anyway. And so I thought that journalism could be a way to tell the stories of the people around the world that did not have access to, let's say, mainstream media or others, and to specifically try to bring into the audience different points of view than the ones like pushed by the media mainstream. I think that at the time when I started, there was much more plurality of voices of media in general. Now we see a complete monopoly from different groups, especially it depends in countries. In each country is a bit different, but there is an assimilation, let's say, of a unique thought. So independent journalists, what we do also, it's very, very important to bring on the table different points of view, as I said, but to mainly inform. If you see now we are bombarded all the times by breaking news, the world is changing very, very fast and so on. And sometimes we could say that most of the people are overwhelmed and confused by really what's going on. So I think that the role of journalists is very important in this sense, because we needed to, try to understand what's going on and then, explain it to the public. There was once this really famous journalist that said that the role of a journalist is very simple. You have two people, one says that it's sunny, the other one says that it's rainy, and it's our duty to go outside and understand, is it raining or is there sun? So like this, you have to really go out and understand the reality around you. And this part really fascinated and resonated in me when I was younger.
Benedetta is known for her documentaries such as Blooming in the Desert, which tells the story of the transformation of the city of Raqqa in Syria after the defeat of ISIS, and the documentary film I'm the Revolution, which tells the story of 3 women activists from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Her documentary Blooming in the Desert was previously broadcasted on Jin TV.
مريم إبراهيم، إدارة المرأة في الرقة ناطقة باسم إدارة المرأة في الرقة.
عواطف العيسى، إدارية المرأة بلدية الشعب في الرقة.
اسمي هند عبد العزيز من مدينة الرقة.
Today, the city of Raqqa is under the control of the HTS, and we can see that women's rights and achievements, which they have been fighting for years, are taken away from them today. So this showed us once again how important the defense and documentation of women's achievements is, and how important the role of women's journalism is within this. Now, I also want to dive a bit like into the work that you do, especially as a filmmaker also. You are like known for also many internationally renowned documentaries. Could you please tell us like what is the goal that you follow with your documentaries?
As a journalist, I also covered all the war against ISIS. I started, traveling a lot, going to the front lines and so on. And I realized that sometimes an article is not enough to actually describe the reality, And with documentaries, you can actually maybe reach different audiences and captivate more, people and understanding. And with images, most of the times it's easier to empathize, because you actually visually see it. While, we know that the people are also reading less and less. But there are also, it's another aspect. It's about, having the space to really tell a story. Documentaries allows you, time and also time, like reflections, and to go much, much deeper in a life of a person. So in reality, I started making documentaries during the uprising of Gezi Park in 2013 in Turkey, in Istanbul specifically. And that was more of an experiment for me. But then I understood that the medium was very, very important. So I continued making documentaries. And, the ones that I did were like, their main objective was to challenge again the, perceptions of people or women in particular that was pushed by, again, the media mainstream. Like if you think about maybe 10 years ago, very easily, when we talk in Europe of the Western world about the woman in the Middle East, especially also after the war of Kobane, there were two stereotypes. One was, the woman victims, most of the time portrayed in refugee camps with children around her, a victim in need of like a savior kind of portrait. And then there was the one that of the, YPG, or other woman or woman fighting, portraying them with a Kalashnikov and long braids, but completely empty their figures of political, let's say, of, why were they fighting? Why were they doing these kind of things? Not taking seriously also the ideology that brought us to defend the land, the woman, and the people. So this was something that really, really bothered me. And having met a lot of friends and having seen, what the revolution in Rojava was achieving, having got to know also more the ideology behind the women's liberation movement, I decided to make a film that, could link different women in different places, and also how would you say, using different tools to fight for women's liberation.
The women of Afghanistan has been the first victim of war and injustice. They have been deprived from all their rights in the past 40 years. If they want to end violence, they have to struggle and fight for their rights. But we are not victims.
Spartacus, a feminist Spartacus of Iraq, to organize women, to tell them that this is not what a human being should be living like. I realized that the young women who stepped out of their houses and they faced that slavery and they rebelled against it, they understood this reality very well.
تنها هنا برالي مهنا هنا قاعدة مهنا زلام تشوني زكي جنين بدا يعني هرتنم ببيرانجي هني وصلت هني وكي قو سلاح رادك وبيش دك هبنا أمنت هني بيجن أمرجابها يعني السوري حمير زقار بكن مش رأى مجيب بزي برن عيني كاربن يعني بيت تشتاقوا ماكرية عندكم هو كميناك شيء بشكونا
One of the women activists who is portrayed in the movie I'm the Revolution is the Iraqi women activist Yanar Mohammed, who was targeted and killed in front of her house on the 2nd March 2026. Benedetta talked about us, about how she got to know Yanar, and shared her memories of her with us.
You know, it was for me a little bit like, let's say, a shock to know of her assassination, because then this was like maybe naive from my side. But I always thought that the other two protagonists were more, quote unquote, endangered than Yanar. And Yanar was a really, really charismatic figure, for sure. We met the first time in 2016 when she went to New York, because at the time I was living in the US, to talk before the UN Council about the situation of women in Iraq. And specifically, you know, at the time, there was still, of course, occupation. And she also talked about that, you know, the impact of the occupation by the US, the international forces on women specifically. But she was also telling her story, meaning, you know, what she decided to do, in the sense that Yanar and her family escaped the Saddam regime, and they moved to Canada, where she then trained and studied to become an architecture, and also, you know, started to have a family. Then in 2003, when the war started, she immediately went back, hoping to actually be part of the reconstruction of a, you know, a different Iraq. But it was very, very clear since the beginning that the international coalition would not empower the secular forces on the ground, but instead they sided with the Shia side of the population in implementing a Shia kind of government. And so Yanar, knowing very well also her birth country and the situation of women, decided to start an underground shelter, and then that became a network of shelters to help a woman escaping honor killing. Honor killing, you know, is that practice that unfortunately is very much still in use in a lot of parts of the world, in which if a young woman is believed to have done something improper or that could damage the image, the honor of the family, then she would get killed by the family. And you know, Yanar thought that this was like beside barbaric, but a huge injustice on women. And so she helped, you know, until the end of her life, more than 1,000 women escaping that situation. But also she opened a shelter, an underground shelter for LGBTQI people as well, the first one, you know, in Iraq. And I think Yanar, you know, like that talk with her back in 2015 was something that it always stayed in the back of my mind, that I really wanted to do something, you know, with her and tell her story, that I thought it was so brave and, you know, very important also to tell this form of resistance, you know, in these places, because this is what it is. It's a question of resistance and solidarity amongst women. And it was also very important for me that Yanar was not so individualistic in the sense that she also built a movement around her. And so also other women, if something happened to her, could take and continue the struggle and the resistance. For sure, for a lot of women, especially the most young one, Yanar has become for them like part of their family, part of, like a much larger embrace. And her, assassination, it's a really huge hit to the organization that is called OFI, it's the organization for Iraq, for freedom for Iraqi women. And so, she was under threat for many years. And I think that on March 2nd, when she was assassinated, it was exactly the time in which Iran started bombing Baghdad. And the perpetrators, I believe that they used this, new war to actually kill her, and hoping that nobody would actually, notice or realize what happened. Of course, there have been a lot of different reactions because Yanar was really known. She was able to travel a lot, to tell the stories and so on. So at least in this part, we defeated them. Yes, no, I just wanted to say that, of course, when you make a documentary on somebody, whoever that might be, they stay with you for a very long time as filmmaker, because you film them. Well, of course, you talk to them for a long time, you film them, but then there is the whole, process afterwards to actually make a film, and you watch and re-watch and re-listen to the words, hundreds of times, and you got to know very much the person in a very kind of, let's say, personal way. You understand how they talk, how they move, how, the expressions. You get to, learn a lot about them. And I think this is sometimes very difficult, also to let go when the work is finished, because, they become parts of your daily life, and it creates like a connection, specifically, from us that are doing this work. I'm sure it happened to a lot of you, working on different stories. And, it's something very, very particular that I have experienced by making documentaries.
How do you see the connection between like women's freedom movements and journalism, especially like women journalists? What's the like role of women journalists for you within the context of like freedom movements, women's freedom movements?
I think it's a very important role in general, not just in the context of the freedom movement, but specifically, as you all well know, like the Third World War, it's a hybrid war. It's but like fought on different levels. And for sure, the propaganda and media is something also very, it's a field that it's very combative, the so-called winning hearts and mind of people through disinformation in this case. And we see how much, the state's media or even mainstream medias, they actually fall into the trap of disinformation, whether it's just because they don't have enough sources, or they just, repeat what different institutions say to them, but they don't approach this in a critical thinking way. And this is very, very important, specifically also for women's journalists. I think that women's journalists can really shed lights on things that are very important for society, and less, for the powerful people. We have a way to actually see things or analyze things that is very different. And especially in this system, in this capitalist system that is built completely around men in whatever aspects of it, being able to have our voices, and spread our voices, it's very, 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 very important, and also for women's journalists, it's very important, but not just for all journalists, but is to highlight and understand the alternative, because there is an alternative for this system in which also the women's liberation movement believe in, which is democratic confederalism. And I think that explaining, reporting from the ground, interviewing the people who are actually living it, but with a very important, very, very important approach is to also, not hide the contradictions, the problems, and everything that is happening while, trying to build this alternative. This is also very important. I think that women's journalists, but in general, women, they have to be more active, let's say, in the various kind of debates over very important geopolitical questions that are rising, in the past years or so on. And we have also not the duty to have our voices heard.
We also talked about a documentary called Matchmaker, which tells the story of women from the UK who decided to join ISIS.
I would say that like the main goal is always, to give another narrative. Beside I Am the Revolution, I did another film that is called The Matchmaker, and that is a film about a woman from Britain who decides to join the Islamic State, and she became one of their most important propagandists, during the war and during the time of the so-called caliphate.
I'm okay with being filmed, and my full name is Tuba Bashir Gondal. I was coming from the territory of ISIS in Baghuz. I wish I never made Twitter anyway. I'm just speaking openly on Twitter, I never recruited anyone specifically, no.
مكر جنيوان والله جنيوان شميرة بيستر بمكر.
I have no knowledge about this.
جاد قومت تشتكنا تقرا وهرا بيستري.
I have completely forgotten that stage of my life. Really, it's.
داعش لفي داري بنكت أما هين هيا يعني هين خلايوي هيا هين فكري هيا إيديولوجياوي هيا جبوي كي يعني هيا نجو خلاص بويا.
But they must deal with us.
And why did I do that? It was very difficult for sure, but it was very important for me for the people also to understand in Europe and the Western world that first of all, there is like a real problem in society that a lot of people do not have an aim and an objective anymore. There are not ethics, there is no society, there is a very fragmented society, and therefore a lot of people were captivated to the idea of being part of a community. So, but of course, not all the people who have the feelings joined ISIS afterwards, but just to say, that it's really important to also self-analyze our society when something like such as a phenomenon, arise, such as the more than 100,000 people that joined ISIS. And the second objective was also to kind of, again, challenge the mainstream narrative that this woman who joined the Islamic State did absolutely nothing. They were just at home taking care of the children. And this is not true. We saw it on the ground very clearly, which kind of role the woman in ISIS had. So, this is why the reasons like that moved me in these past years.
Yes, and also, as you now also mentioned, that you lived through many, I believe, really intense and also dangerous situations. in like situations both like during war zones and also in like places and like geographies that were also like not safe for women in general, and where there were also like a lot of dangerous situations. What was maybe a situation that really like stayed in your mind, or like a moment that really touched you? Like it can both be something that like touched you or shocked you in like a negative way, but also something that maybe surprised you, where like you learned a lesson while you were shooting your documentary.
I mean, there are a lot of situations, different situations that have arisen, of course, and most of them are not really on film. I think that one of the situations that was most difficult for me was when we, in 2017, we were crossing into Rojava. And, you know, at the time there was not really like legal ways to enter Rojava. And so we kind of sneaked in, and in that same night, Turkey bombed Karachi. And in Karachi, there were many victims. Karachi was a kind of a logistical hub for the Syrian Democratic Forces, really close, let's say, to the border. And then one night, in a very unexpected way, Turkey started bombing, and we also, like in front of our eyes, what was happening, also because that was our destination. And we were not there because we were, quote unquote, late. We had to stop on the way several times. And I have to say that seeing, you know, the bombardment, and then going, of course, to the funerals of all the friends that were killed that night, specifically, you know, the friends from the press also were very hit with a lot of shaheeds. And that was a moment that really stayed with me for a long time. Also, on the negative side, I think that filming in the camps where the women who have joined ISIS were staying or were being kept was also a very difficult experience. Not so much because they attacked us physically or so on, but there was this constant feel of insecurity and, you know, and being observed all the times by this woman. That was something also very difficult. And after staying in the camps for almost a month, when we kind of wrap up the shooting, we all got sick. And this is something, you know, from the tension, from, you know, the different, it also was very hot. It was during the summer inside the tents where it was also very hot, but it's more than, you know, than that. It was like to stay in that psychological kind of mindset, because, you know, you have in front of you people who made the exactly opposite choices that I personally made. So sometimes it was very difficult. One thing that I always say in general, I think that when you are, you know, like in war zones, and of course, you know, there is a lot of violence, there are a lot of threats, but it creates also a sense of solidarity and friendship that is really strong. And this is something that at first, you know, really surprised me. Then now, of course, reflecting after many years, I think it's kind of normal also. I think in general, you know, like another thing that throughout the travels, especially in Afghanistan, in different places, you know, I could see or had the chance to talk to women that were completely enslaved by their male custodian, whoever that might be, father, husband, brother, you know, and most of the times I could see how they were treated. And, you know, we are talking about around against 2017, and there were no Taliban. There was the international coalition and the sort of puppet government of Afghanistan, but the situation of women was still very bad. Not, of course, as today. Today, it reached the peaks of, I don't know, really, I'm sorry, like unimaginable violence maybe for us and the restrictions. But so anyway, in like there happened throughout that men would offer me like literally a woman saying bring her to Europe, and that's something also that was very kind of difficult, not knowing to have the privilege to have the passport to actually be able to travel and not be in that situation anymore. This is something that sometimes Europeans and in general Western people do not really think about, that the privilege that we have about being able to move around much easier ways than the rest of the world, let's say.
Yes, thanks a lot. And now you also mentioned like the difficulties that you also faced while shooting your documentaries, also in countries in the Middle East mainly. But like, what would you say were like difficulties like outside of this, for example, because like the stories that you're covering are often not covered by the Western media. Like a lot of like stories and like also experience that you portray in your documentaries, they're not really shown in like Western media. Like the realities, they're not really known. Were you ever faced with like any other like threats or difficulties because of this, like because of the content of your documentaries?
In general, this now is a quiet moment, let's say, but I received over the years many threats, mainly online, like 99.9% from men who, kind of tried to I would say, delegitimize my work specifically and insult me as a woman and threat me as a woman, with violence against me. And this I never really took it seriously, in the sense that it was messages on social media and so on. It's still a very kind of not good feelings, to be honest, but it's something that comes, for the work. And if you make somebody angry, that means you're doing a good work, in general. I think that mainly on the ground, the main kind of challenge, especially when we talk in places like Baghdad or Afghanistan or other places, the main problem, I think, is that of course, I don't look like a kind of a local, so I was very, very much observed. But specifically, when we shot I Am the Revolution, I was very, very adamant and clear that I wanted to do this film with just a woman's film crew. And at the beginning, especially producers and so on, they were like, it's impossible, you cannot do it, because you will never find a woman director of photography that will come with you. And this was an answer that for me was unacceptable. And so I did find different director of photography, women that could come with me to shoot these documentaries. And I think it was very, very important because we kind of opened a door for then other productions, to send an all-women's team on the ground. And I think that this is very important, and for me it was very important for I Am the Revolution specifically, because when working with other, let's say, DOPs in this kind of context, I could see that, first of all, the camera most of the time was looking down at the woman, because it's a question of also height and so on. And I wanted a very immersive kind of look, of the documentary. This is it's a bit technical, but and also it was important for me to be all woman to also build that trust amongst the team and the people and the women that we were going to meet.
In the end, I want to ask you about your future projects, like what are you working on at the moment and what are your plans for the future?
So at the moment, we are in the editing process of a new film that is called Nûbihar, New Spring. And it's a film that basically spun in the past 2 years of the movement, specifically of the women's guerrillas in the mountains of Kandil. And we were able, to spend many months with the friends inside the tunnels and so on. But at the same time, seeing and understanding the changes that have then brought to the dissolution of the PKK. And also the starting of this peace process. So this film is very, very important, at least to me, because it's really, you can see how, despite all the difficulties, despite the war, despite, these the drones attacks that happened, also daily while we were there and so on, the women's movement is as built like a different space of life, of free life inside the mountains. I think that most of the people in general, when they think about tunnels or caves, they think automatically to Hamas, or, something like very, very similar. But the movement in reality has built spaces of life, there are like rooms for discussion, for studying. There is a part that makes resistance music. I was a Chia, for instance, and it is incredible to witness, what was happening and built over these past years and the resistance that all the friends put in there. Of course, it's very, very difficult life, especially when you cannot go out so much. But it also, I think the film it also expresses the joy of living a free life together. The editor I'm working with is not so familiar with the movement, and he told me that he was shocked by seeing the amount of footage, beside that it was a lot of footage, but in most of them, the friends are laughing and, being like very friendly, and you cannot imagine, like something like this, like the laughters, the love that you can also see really in the footage. And that was very surprising for him. And I don't know, I'm really hoping, to be able, sorry, I rephrase. Of course, with all these changes in the area and the peace process, which will be obviously included in the film, I hope, to be able to portray, the life, but also the hopes for a democratic future and for a democratic society, from the mountains to, the big cities of Kurdistan. And yes, and we are now, as I said, in the editing process. The film follows different characters, different woman characters, that different guerrillas that have really different characteristics, and they show us, this underground world de facto. And, in this crisis, we are also opened a crowdfunding in order to be able to continue our work and hopefully publish the film as soon as possible.
Dear viewers, we have reached the end of today's episode, and we will end this episode with some videos from Benedetta's new documentary Nûbihar on New Spring. Until our next episode, take care and stay well.
خودی بله
چیه یه دوام بیاد چیه نه
Navim Tekoşin Ozan 32 sala Dinav Hareketa Jinu PKK'de Tekoşin Meşin Kobani evdir. Ev heval hemu Kobani devun. Hemu heval üç çakış ciye hatın. Çun arikariya şeriko yani Kobani vakti Daesh erişkir. Hemu heval jin dü helede asta fermandariye devun. Fermandari berxodan Kobani heval jin bun. هم کار و خباتی خوی دید کن هم جیانا خواه بردام دکن هم جی جبو شر آمده کاری هر دایم افتش تکی پارچه یک جیانه ما
هندك جهة مثلا بيشها بمشهد هرفنا مثلا هندك جيب لا هاوسا بكن لبس هندك جيب جب باز بده هندك جهة بيشها برنا هندك جهة بيشها خبز برديوار وانا وصا أبكن لبس ناملوی و بلا هر جوری بی منک هر ناملو سبی هیچ ناملو نداکوی هون رو نشتن هون رابون و خدا بر دیوار هر ناملو سبت جبرت نزاش قرش
از ویش بشیدیم پیزدگه
من دومان بهنا دكره بهنا دكره خاش بشتينش بنات دومان بهنا نقره أكتي برشتا بنوصل بر
هنجي كيلك ايش هيك
يا بابا كابينة
خوشتر جیان کی ها تچ من اوه کرچیا çünkü ciyavlo işte aşkım insan aram dikin hemrov ter dikin ne
Havaladır. Kesek avcıları valay peki? Yani de planlamayı da hava. Ne olsa? Varıyla kutucu bunu.
ده بس كمان نجيب رمامي
نجيتك كده يا جماعة
هيدا
جيا وين
Suyun akar munzur durmaz çağlarsın.
Pır hoş ne? Süper. Ya.
Etmişti şaşma hadi ders tutamalı bir çekim bu kadar farklı şamalı bir şey. Canım kim temam kaz bulandayı. Kurban dur bu.
Tabii binler.
Hoşa. Biraz pır acayibim ya. Hisse pır acayip da çebu. Ya hoşa da.